Thank you all. Thanks to the organizers, the organizing committee, for inviting me here and for including a Pacific voice. I see from your membership list that it is quite diverse, but that we Pacific Islanders are underrepresented. But this is the beginning of what I think will be a robust relationship, and we can certainly expand membership and involvement in this wonderful organization. I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background about my current gig and the work that we do at the Pacific Islands Development Program and the East-West Center. And then I'm going to talk about the work we are doing to identify and to take action, recognize and create opportunities and threats that exist in our region. And I do this all from a Pacific Islands perspective. I also must say, a little post-it note here not to forget, a disclaimer. I'm sharing my perspective as a Pacific Islander. I'm originally from the island of Guam. My father, the late Paul Hattori, is originally from Kalihi, Japanese American. He was a member of one of 80 families that moved from the Hawaiian Islands to the Mariana Islands, stayed, intermarried. My mother is a native Chamorro of the island of Guam. We are an American territory. Prior to that, we were occupied by the Japanese and then a colony of Spain. So we have a long, fraught relationship with many imperial countries. And I share my thoughts today as a Pacific Islander working in the region for decades and living in Hawaii since the mid-'80s. But I do not, these thoughts and perspectives do not represent any official statements or perspectives of the East-West Center or any other institution that I am associated with. The East-West Center was created through an act of Congress. I was drawn to the East-West Center after spending most of my career in the University of Hawaii system. I was drawn to the East-West Center because the mission of the center is to create a more equitable, peaceful, and prosperous Asia-Pacific region. So we promote better relations and understanding among people and nations of the United States, Asia, and the Pacific. So we're very geographically focused on those three areas. And we do this through encouraging cooperative study, research, and dialogue. Every academic year, we have about 200 students in residence, most graduate students, and many of them are on scholarships funded by different countries and as well as the U.S. government and the University of Hawaii at Manoa. The Pacific Islands Development Program is a unique entity within the East-West Center. We were created in 1980. The two gentlemen in this photo are the late great Prime Minister of Fiji, Ratu Sir Kamisese Mara. And if anyone's interested in the Pacific, he wrote a really good book called The Pacific Way. And then Governor Ariyoshi of the state of Hawaii. In 1980, they signed an agreement with a Pacific Congress of Leaders that established PIDP, and our focus is, in 1980, this was when many Pacific nations were just coming out of trust relationships, stewardship, and colonization, and emerging as independent nations. So at that time, the focus of PIDP was to advance collective efforts, help these new governments and societies develop. So we're focused on equitable social and economic development. And beyond that, PIDP actually serves three separate roles. They overlap sometimes, they conflict with each other sometimes. It's an exciting place to be despite the tensions and the challenges. We are a Pacific-focused program within the East-West Center. East-West Center is focused again on Asia, United States, and Pacific. So we're squarely focused on the Pacific and relationships with our allies and partners of the Pacific. We are a secretariat of that Pacific Leaders Congress that created us in 1980. It is now known as the Pacific Islands Conference of Leaders. And then we were a founding member of the Council of Regional Organizations of the Pacific. So we serve 3 distinct roles, and we have a staff of about 12 full-time employees, a dozen interns, and probably a dozen adjunct fellows. As a member of the Council of Regional Organizations of the Pacific, we join with 8 other regional organizations. So if you're doing any work in the Pacific, these are the 9 regional organizations that form the technical expertise. We are technical resources for Pacific Island governments. At the apex of the architecture of the Pacific Islands is an organization known as the Pacific Islands Forum. Their secretariat serves as a permanent chair of CROP, and then these are the other agencies. So these are agencies that can work multilaterally. They can work across all sectors of society, and they do work across all sectors, covering very large areas. Forum Fisheries was deeply involved in the negotiations of the Tuna Treaty with the United States and the Pacific Islands. Pacific Aviation has really helped to expand capacity and aviation routes across the Pacific. SPC is the largest of the 9 organizations. We've got Pacific Power, Pacific Tourism, SPREP, one that many of your countries are members of, are working with. SPREP leads the Pacific action and engagement with climate and environment. They take the lead on our presence and engagement in with the UNFCCC and COP. So SPREP, very important. And then the University of the South Pacific, the premier regional organization. Those of you working in higher education, this is an organization that you'd want to partner with. They are in a new phase with their current chancellor, looking at more partnerships with international universities. They have learning centers across the Pacific region. PIDP is the only member of the CROP family based in the North Pacific. So all of these other agencies are all headquartered in the South Pacific. That gives us a unique advantage. We are also the only CROP agency in the United States. And so we form a bridge between the United States and the rest of the Pacific, and between the North Pacific and the South Pacific. There's some of you here from Aotearoa, New Zealand. When we hear the word Pacifica in New Zealand, it often does not include people from the North Pacific, Micronesia, and those islands. And so we're really working with all of our partner agencies a lot across the CROP to really strengthen relationships between North and South Pacific and between the Pacific and other countries. I mentioned that we are chair of the Pacific Islands Conference of Leaders. These are our members. So we are much larger than the forum. The forum, again, is at the apex of the regional architecture. If you want to negotiate with Pacific governments, you go through the forum. We work at a lower level, though we still work with leaders of 20 island nations and territories. So what sets us apart from other regional bodies is that we are the most inclusive, and we include voices and representatives, heads of government from the territories. So Guam, American Samoa, CNMI, the French territories are also included here. So we work at the policy level with these heads of government. We convene the Pacific Islands Conference of Leaders and its standing committee, one of those 2 bodies, annually. The last convening of the leaders, this was taken in at that meeting, September 2022. Our vision as both the CROP agency and secretariat of the Pacific Islands Conference of Leaders is to advance a collective ambition of our Pacific people. And our dream, our vision for the Pacific is a peaceful, prosperous, just, and inclusive region. If you're doing any research in the region, if you're from a country that is a development partner, or a member of the forum or any one of the other regional CROP agencies, I hope that what I'm sharing next will be helpful to you. And that is, I'm going to start with wisdom from the region. If you're working with us or for us You need to collaborate and consult us. This has been a major challenge for our partners. I'm not sure why. Often, and think about this, many of you are from academia. The experts who speak about the Pacific are academic experts with no lived direct experience in the Pacific. Why do we continue to let this phenomenon persist? And it doesn't only apply to the Pacific. When the war between Russia and Ukraine started, American media, their first consultants who told us, Americans, about Russia were Russian experts who were professors who had never actually been in Russia or who had no direct lived experience or ancestral ties to Russia. Their expertise is limited. So when you're working with the Pacific, reach out to the Pacific. Those 9 agencies, East-West Center, University of Hawaii at Manoa, are perfect places to go for that kind of resource. So there are threats, there are opportunities, actions we can take. And my goal is to raise awareness, help raise the Pacific literacy among all of our people and our partners, and then to encourage you to partner with Pacific Islanders wherever they are, when they're available, and where they're available. I say when because we often are asked to attend webinars, events, conference calls based on your time zones and not ours. And not having no sensitivity to that creates a lot of hardship for us. We are asked to attend meetings. Washington is famous for this. They actually had the audacity to suggest that the Pacific Islands Conference of Leaders come to DC and that we convene it in DC, not in the Pacific Islands. And the leaders were all very much against that. We stood our ground and held it in Hawaii. It was quite successful. But just the arrogant assumption that that you can call the leaders of independent nations to your place because you want to meet with them is something that is very troubling. And then as academics and engaged citizens of your countries, I invite you to, as you learn more about the Pacific, learn about what your countries are doing in the Pacific or not doing in the Pacific. The United States calls itself a Pacific country, and yet when we look at its behaviors towards Native Hawaiians, towards people like me from Guam, the colonies, the territories, and the people from the nations with which we have compacts of free association. We have treaties with people of these nations. Look at America's treatment of those people. I don't consider America a Pacific nation because it is not in relationship with all of these people, and it has not done well by all of us. And so, places like the Blue Pacific Caucus in Congress, that bipartisan group is working to help mitigate the negative consequences of that kind of attitude and past the legacies of U.S. imperialism, and really establish rich relationships. So there are lots of ways that you can do that. So I encourage you to think about that. How does your country interact with the Pacific? What do you consider meaningful engagement? What kind of research are you engaged in? And who are you engaged with? When we talk about wisdom from the Pacific, there are guiding documents. We are very clear. Our nations, our leaders have been very clear. And my advice to everyone working with us and for us, interested in studying us, writing grants to help with our development and capacity building projects, look to the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. It is online, ratified by our leaders and ratified 3 years ago in Fiji, endorsed every year since then. And then the 2050 implementation plan, also online. This is our guiding star. This is what we want for the Pacific. There are themes around things like technology, around things like wellness, leadership. I'll speak to some of those in a minute. And also publicly available, the outcomes, the communiques from every annual meeting of the Pacific Islands Forum. Again, the the apex of our regional architecture, the voices of the Pacific come through in every communique. Again, that's also available online. The last convening was in September last year in the Kingdom of Tonga. The communique lists, as they all do, the priorities for the Pacific. So if you're interested in technology, look at the 2050. You want to help the Pacific with technology, look at the 2050 strategy, look at the implementation plan. The White House, U.S. White House Indo-Pacific strategy references the Blue Pacific, the 2050 strategy. The Blue Pacific Caucus references that strategy. East-West Center's strategic plan references the Pacific strategy. Your grant applications, your research proposals will carry more weight and be much more relevant if you connect to these documents from the region. It's what our people want and have identified, and it's a way to truly partner with us. Another foundational document that's very important and has recently been revitalized is the Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration. In these communiques and these documents, what comes through as our island, our region's priorities are climate, environment, right? That is the number one threat to security, to safety, prosperity, and the well-being of our people. Right? The second is, or another one is gender equality. Except for the North Pacific, gender equality is a huge problem. The number of women in legislative seats in governing councils, parliaments across the South Pacific has actually decreased in recent years. And so Women of the Wave is an initiative of the crop agencies, because within the 9 agencies, there are very few paths to upward mobility for women. And so Women of the Wave is our initiative and our commitments related to that. If you're interested in gender equality and social inclusion, connect with us, look at the Gender Equality Declaration. These are all very powerful ways to tap into the aspirations and the needs for the Pacific. Good governance is another priority. In fact, in the 2050 strategy and our implementation plan is one of the major themes, one of the 4 major themes is political leadership and regionalism. How do we work together harmoniously? How do we promote security, stability, and peace in the region? We wish that all of our Pacific people can benefit from the forum, from groups like the Pacific Islands Conference of Leaders, to safeguard, secure, and progress our Blue Pacific continent. That is our identity as Oceania, the Blue Pacific continent. And again, we have regional priorities that are in these documents that I've mentioned. So one of the ways that PIDP has responded to this call for action is that we provide technical expertise for good governance. We have a couple of large regional projects. We have 2 in particular that serve as really good models that we are working on expanding. Leadership development is very important. We work, the photo on the right is a group of our 8th cohort. We're actually in our 10th year. We've had 9 cohorts, over 157 alumni. These are emerging leaders in what's known as the Pacific Islands Leadership Program, funded by the government of Taiwan. Again, we're in our 11th year, getting ready to launch our 10th cohort. These are emerging leaders from Pacific Island nations. Okay. We start online, so we have some hybrid work with them. We bring them to Hawaii for several weeks, and then we take them to Taiwan, where they spend 4 to 6 weeks, depends on the funding in the cohort, really learning about the indigenous peoples of Taiwan, the other people of Taiwan, the government working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and nonprofits, other agencies across all sectors, while they develop this very strong network of leaders. Again, they're coming from all across the Pacific. From 2023, with some funding by the U.S. government, we launched the Resilient Pacific Island Leaders Program. These are 20 to 25 mid-level leaders. Some of them are actually the cabinet members, but they're mid-level leaders from across the Pacific Islands Conference of Leaders members, so that it's the independent Pacific as well as the territories. They spend some time online together in Hawaii for several weeks, and then a week in Washington, D.C., meeting with members of Congress, with groups like the U.S. Institute for Peace, the National Security Council, developing networks. These are the most transformational programs possible. And if in your institutions you can generate programs like this, and we'll gladly share any information that you're interested in, anytime you can get people from different Pacific Islands together so that they can form bonds, especially people who are emerging leaders. We are impacting and shaping the future of the governments, the futures of these islands. Many of these people will become leaders at the same time. They're around the same age. They will lead their island governments, civil society organizations, entrepreneurial organizations, and regional harmony is strengthened. Regional stability is strengthened when you have leaders who are already well connected. There was a time in the history of the Pacific where every single leader was an alumnus of the East-West Center, right? There's something powerful that happens when leaders of other independent countries actually know each other, right? And so I think any time you can do these sorts of programs, it's very, any exchange. For some of these people, it's the first time they ever came to Hawaii, experienced the United States, and many of them had never met anyone from outside of their island or outside their subregion, Melanesia, Micronesia, or Polynesia, right? Many South Pacific Islanders had never met anyone from Micronesia. So it was quite empowering. And will go a long way, I think, to help with regional harmony. Gender equality and social inclusion, as I said earlier, is a priority for the region. Micronesia is matrilineal historically, and so we see much more gender equality there, but not in the South, not as much in the South Pacific. We do this through community engagement and through activism and raising awareness. In the state of Hawaii, the most recent large groups of migrants are from the freely associated states, the Federated States of Micronesia in particular. Hawaii has seen waves of migrants dating back to the plantation era. The history in Hawaii is that the most recent migrants, the most recent groups, especially if they're large, the most recent group of foreigners, face the worst discrimination. And we have seen in recent history rising levels of racism and civil rights violations against Micronesians in Hawaii. If you're in the U.S., Hawaii is the worst place to be if you're a Micronesian. So to combat this, we raise awareness, we celebrate Micronesian culture, but we have for 10 years, I've been involved in professional development with school teachers, with social service providers, with medical services providers on culturally sustaining professional practices for Micronesians. We celebrate our cultural heritage, creating opportunities for people to gather and learn about each other, supporting our youth, very important, and then disaster response. Caring Culture Micronesia is a program of professional development for people from all sectors. We started with school teachers because we were seeing systemic racism and civil rights violations against Micronesians in Hawaii's public schools. We had some violence, school violence on Hawaii Island. And so for 10 years, we have been running classes for educators. We've also been running these professional development workshops for people in the judicial system, social workers, and medical health professionals who are servicing and supporting Micronesians. We do this face-to-face as well as online. We've done this on almost every island. There's a quote here from one of our online participants. She says the course should be a requirement for all teachers in Hawaii. It's an empowering course that can really make a difference in their teaching and perspectives on students. We have seen participants in our courses change not only their attitudes towards students from racist to much more positive and supporting and understanding. We've seen them make changes in their classroom, school level changes, as well as changes in their neighborhoods as they partner with Micronesians and better understand and support us. We celebrate Micronesian heritage. We've done this for 10 years, 11 years now. Our 10th festival last year was held at Bishop Museum. We had over 3,000 people from the general public come. It was a day of celebration, learning about Micronesian cultures. All groups except for Nauru were represented. And we do this every year. And it's a really important part. Anytime you can create opportunities for people to come together and learn about each other goes a long way towards supporting harmony and peace. Engaging our youth has been something that the Pacific leaders have been very adamant about. The youth are our future. Pacific Islanders grow up with this orientation towards the future, legacy, raising the next generation of leaders, transmitting our cultural values into the future through our youth. So there are a number of ways we do this. The photos on the far right are 2 events. Again, I say, meet the communities where they are and when they come together. The picture on the both pictures actually on the right are from Hawai'i Island, 2 different ends of the island. One is a annual Youth Empowerment for Success Summit, where we talk about paths to careers and higher education for Micronesian students. Rematau is a small cultural group in YAP in the Federated States of Micronesia. We go to their annual graduation and support that, where they celebrate everyone graduating from kindergarten to PhD. And then the other 2 photos are taken throughout the South Pacific. And in Fiji, we convene sub-regional dialogues when we want youth to give us their perspectives on things like regional harmony, security, environment, gender equality. Another thing that we do, and I highly encourage, whenever you can create internships, we have an internship program called YPOP, Young Professionals of the Pacific. These are undergraduate and graduate students who are from the Pacific Islands, international students and COFA students or freely associated states citizens who are studying in Hawaii, who work with us on internships, paid and unpaid internships, engaged in the work of PIDP. So when we have regional convenings, they support the convenings. They learn how to be rapporteur. They learn how to do back-end support for Zoom webinars and meetings. They meet with diplomats who come through. They help us research and write policy. And then they go back to their countries. And so it's a capacity building effort. And something that many of you who are in higher education can do, creating internship programs within your institutions. The last example of our community outreach was a project in Maui in response to the devastating wildfires in Lahaina. There were thousands of Pacific Islanders who were affected. Some of them were citizens of the U.S., but of Pacific Islander heritage, and some were citizens of their Pacific Islands who were living in the United States. The American organizations that responded to that disaster, Red Cross Pacific and FEMA, the federal agency, did not include interpretation, foreign language interpreting and translation in their services. So imagine thousands of people in that fire and in the aftermath, in community centers like the one shown above, with no foreign language support. I found out in a community meeting a week and a half after the tragedy. And so what we did was we became advocates, raised awareness. People just assumed this was part of disaster response in America. Sadly, it is not part of our federal response to any disaster. So we reached out to members of the Hawaii government, former Governor John Wahei, who's part of our board, and current Governor Green, and said this is happening. They were actually turning away interpreters who were coming. They weren't the first interpreters they turned away were actually Spanish speakers, because there are 3,000 Hispanic Hispanic people in Maui, and they were turning away the Spanish language interpreters. So the Pacific Island interpreters didn't even attempt to. A week and a half in, we got this fixed, and then the photo at the top is an outreach event. Shortly after that, we were helping. We sent a team of our students and staff to help the Tongan consulate, which only has one consular official. There were 1,000 Tongans involved who were impacted, and so the ones who were Americans needed help getting new Social Security cards and birth certificates, access, knowing what aid they could tap into. And then the ones who were Tongan citizens needed help from the Tongan government getting birth certificates and access to knowing what services they could access, because it's different if you're a citizen and you're not. So our students who are Tongan, and actually I had a Marshallese speaker there, they did interpretation for Marshallese and Tongan speakers, and also help with immigrant support services. So part of the work we do is supporting the community, bringing our international students into this kind of relief effort and tapping into them, into their knowledge. Tapping into the knowledge of the Pacific is done through a number of efforts, including research reports. This is the output of an ADB-funded research project, equity-based study of plastic pollution impacts on indigenous communities in Fiji. The Asian Development Bank gives us scholarships for doctoral research in the Pacific by Pacific Islanders. They funded 3 of these studies, and we're hoping that they'll fund more. And then we fully believe in co-constructed knowledge. The Pacific Drought Knowledge Exchange has a lot of products and research outputs that were co-constructed with Pacific Island nations and members of Pacific Island nations. And then on the right, one of many projects we have funded by the Federated States of Micronesia. We have a researcher from India who's a full-time researcher in East West Center, and he partnered with the College of Micronesia to do a study. So he is doing a study on cooktops in Micronesia and the health impacts, because we're using things for fuel that are not good for our health, especially maternal and child health. But rather than doing all the research himself or with people from America, he's mentoring students at the College of Micronesia to help do the research on site and then do the analysis. So that kind of partnership we really endorse and recommend. We put all of that out in a number of formats through the East West Center's website, but also through the Pacific Islands Report, which is at one time was the leading resource for news around the Pacific. It's been revived, and so we have news roundup. You can subscribe to that at pirreport.org. And then we also have what's called Visions and Voices, short papers written about issues related to the Pacific. So use whatever means you have, research, publications, to get voices from the region out there. And then I'll leave you with this slide about how to connect with us. Again, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to be here. Thank all of you for your time and effort. May the rest of this conference be one of connecting, sharing, learning, and inspiring each other, so that together we can work to create a society where peace is built with justice, and justice is guided with aloha. Mahalo.
Thank you very much. We've got about 5 minutes for questions. Is there anyone who wants to quickly get in with a question? Anyone who has a question? Okay, well then I'll take the privilege. one of the things that I think is very difficult to engage with is when you're engaging with marginalized voices, is to know who has agency to speak for whom and on whose behalf. And if you're coming from outside a region, it's very difficult often to engage with a region and with the right people, if you like. Perhaps you can speak a bit to that, because most of us are coming from outside this region.
Sure, it's as you said, very difficult to know. I generally will start with one of my fellow crop agencies, especially if I'm interested in environment around the Pacific. I'll go to someone from SPREP. They have offices around the Pacific. They know who they've sort of vetted who the experts are, they've worked through the local politics. If I'm working in diplomacy, I'll work with the foreign affairs agencies in the governments. Organizations like PIDP and the Pacific Islands Forum are connected to all of our member governments, and so often we'll actually field questions from researchers and other academics, and then help make connections. So we can help do that, and not just in government, but across the civil society. I think that's one way.
So there's a capacity building aspect to that, because there's a how to, if you like, and that's a how to engage in research, but also there's a political aspect to engaging in that, isn't there, as well?
Yes, and research is fundamentally political, especially with the Pacific.
There you go. Discuss.
Yes. So and this is why we're sensitive to that as an agency. PIDP is an agency in the U.S. that is, while we're housed in the East-West Center in America, we are staffed by mostly Pacific Islanders of the region, and so we can help you and we do help people navigate that with the cultural awareness.